Welcome to Bounce Back Stronger, the podcast that explores ways to find peace and purpose no matter what happens. I'm your host, Donna Ferris, and today we're talking with Steve Jaffe, author of the book, The Layoff Journey From Dismissal to Discovery. A little bit about Steve. Like many of us, Steve knows the layoff journey firsthand. After a 25-year career in advertising and marketing, he experienced the emotional impact of a career transition and began exploring job loss through the lens of grief. In his book, Steve reframes layoffs using the 7 stages of grief and shows how intentionality can turn setbacks into powerful turning points. Steve, it's so good to welcome you to Bounce Back Stronger. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm really happy to be here today.
And just so everybody has it, it's here's the book. I found it really helpful. As I mentioned when we were talking before, I've certainly done a lot around grief and the 7 stages, and this is really applicable. And I think really a comforting book. I wish I would have had it in my layoff, actually. You feel like you fall into a black hole very quickly. Folks, this would be really helpful if you're going to run into that. I think it's 43% of people get laid off. Is that something?
40% of all Americans have been laid off at least once.
Yeah.
And I love what you said because that's exactly why I wrote it. I wish I had a book like this when I went through my first layoff. And
Yeah.
as I was researching and thinking about the book, there's nothing else out there that's like this that helps somebody overcome the grief of a layoff. So often conversations and coaching and everything goes straight to here's how you update your resume, here's what you do with your LinkedIn profile. And there's nothing that says, listen, you need to pause. You're going to feel some grief. It's going to hurt. And here's how you get through it so that you can then go on a job interview and be successful. And you can go apply for jobs and manage the grief that's going to come from getting rejected after multiple resumes are submitted or multiple rounds of interviews. After a layoff, there's kind of grief on top of grief. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's
And
very helpful for people to know that there's a process to grief.
yeah,
I think a lot of times, again, it feels like this thing you just fall into and there's no way out. And what I love about what you've done is you've detailed the process that
yeah,
we're all going to go through
hmm
in
hmm
anytime we experience a loss. And I think it just helps, for at least for me. I like seeing, okay, this is where I'm at in the process. And you will move around in it. It's not like you're going to,
yeah,
it's not always exactly linear, but
yeah,
it's really nice to know that there is one and that you will get out to the other side. So I thought
yeah.
that was really great to see in your book.
Yeah, and one of the main things is you realize, okay, I'm not alone. This is a very common way of experiencing any type of grief, and including a layoff from a job. So it normalizes it a little bit,
Yep.
and you start to see that there's a pattern, and this becomes like a practical guide to get through this. And processing this will help you then process any other form of grief or traumatic life experience that you have. They're all the same types of techniques and practices that will lead to an overall healthy outlook on life and build up your ability to process and create resilience and grit and tenacity, all these things that in a way toughen us up but give us the skills to deal with life on life's terms.
That's right. Because as the Buddhists say, which I am one, life is suffering. Yay.
Yeah.
So maybe in one sentence, what's the biggest lie we tell ourselves about getting laid off?
Probably that it's our fault, that you could have done something differently. Maybe you wouldn't have been laid off at all. There's this weird accountability where the circumstances around layoffs are such that it's easier to reduce headcount than it is to drive revenue to the bottom line for a company. So, in that regard, it's a math equation and it's all about revenue for the company. And your salary is an expense. So, they're looking to free up expenses, and you happen to be the easiest way of doing that. It's really not
Mm,
much more than that. But we
yeah.
read into it so much because we create our identities around our jobs and we derive so much pride and joy. We tend to maybe spend more time at work and with those work people than at home with our friends and family sometimes. A lot gets tied up there. and you start to feel like, gosh, maybe I could have done something differently. But ultimately, there's really nothing you can do if your company is undergoing layoffs and you were one of the chosen ones. The best thing you could do is accept it and move on.
Yeah, you spend some time on that. I do appreciate it because in all forms of loss, really, the quicker that you can get to acceptance without avoiding all the other parts, the better off you are. So it doesn't mean that you emotionally step out of it. You do have to go through the different processes and feel it to
Mhm.
heal it. But the sooner you can get to acceptance and say, "Oh, this did happen." And what you're saying here is taking the ego out of it, right? A little
Yeah,
bit because
yeah.
you get wrapped up in it. Oh, I could have done something.
And I think if you understand that it's something outside of your control,
Yeah.
it takes away some of the power of what can be embarrassing. You can feel some
Mm,
shame around it. And that's a difficult thing because if you are full of shame and embarrassment about a layoff, you're not going to talk about it with others. You're not going to try and find community or resources or support. You're going to carry this baggage of, gosh, I'm damaged goods, but you're not. You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think you're right. Acceptance is one of the ways to get toward letting go of some of that baggage and then getting to a place where you can move forward and move on.
yeah, and one of the things you made me think about is this one stat you brought up, which I thought was really something, is that the link between depression and unemployment found that 21% of unemployed Americans suffer from depression,
Yeah.
compared to only 5.6% of those who work full time. So it's really a mental health
Yeah.
thing too. And I think that's true. I think you do fall into some form of depression. How deep it goes is certainly unique, but it's definitely the case.
Yeah, layoffs are full of so much loss. So you lose your job, you lose your paycheck, you lose your health insurance. As a result, it starts to put stresses on other kind of financial responsibilities, which can then lead to maybe some unhealthy coping practices, some
Yes.
unhealthy coping mechanisms. If you are already somebody that may be on borderline with some of those, this can be a trigger for maybe exacerbating them. There are all sorts of physical and mental health repercussions that follow a layoff for a lot of folks. Heart disease, heart attack, you see a higher instance of. You certainly see a higher instance of maybe separation or divorce, mental health things like depression, increased risk of self-harm, suicide, alcoholism. All of those stats all increase after somebody is faced with a layoff. And unfortunately, probably more people are facing layoffs now than ever, which means more people are going through this and experiencing this. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, was to help, give somebody a roadmap and a handbook so that maybe they don't get stuck in any of those unhealthy coping mechanisms.
No, that's really the best reason to write a book,
Yeah.
and I so thank you for it. What's the very first thing somebody should do after they got laid off? I think that's a really great thing to kinda share. What should
Whew.
they do in the first 24 hours?
Just pause, take a minute, give yourself an opportunity to just breathe and sit with the grief and be gentle with yourself, be comforting with yourself. What you're experiencing, what you're feeling is okay and it's normal. Don't try and rush right past it. And don't try and start thinking about, okay, I've got to update my resume. I've got to start networking. I've got to just put all that on the back burner for a minute and just sit with yourself and feel some of the feelings, because you're going to feel denial. You're going to feel anger. You're going to feel like, what could have I have done differently? And those are gonna be really heavy. You're gonna wanna give yourself a minute to process those.
That's really good. And what would be 3 things that someone should do for themselves to get themselves ready for the job hunt process? You have to be in a certain mental state, and you have to
Mhm.
have certain things together to make the turn so that you can start to look for something new. What would you suggest people do?
I think it's important to create a storyline and narrative around this layoff that you can use in your job interviews, that don't place blame, don't
Mm,
show a lot of anger, that put you in a place of acceptance, like you mentioned earlier.
Mm.
And so, for example, one of the things that's really difficult to move on from is your title and the company that you work for. It says a lot about you, right? And we
Mhm.
derive a lot of meaning from that. And then what happens if that's taken away? If you no longer have that business card, then what are you, right? Frame your experience in a way that becomes something that you have ownership over. So, if, for example, let's say you have 25 years of marketing experience, and my last job, I was a vice president of marketing for Ford Motors, right? That's not how you want to define yourself or create your narrative around. You want to tell the story of a 25-year marketing executive with significant automotive experience. That becomes transferable across any job title or company that you can lean into and then tell a story around. And then you don't have to go back and explain why you got laid off from Ford. It creates just a straight line of experience that you can pull from. So it's that reframing when
Mm.
somebody asks you the question in your interview, tell me a little bit about yourself. It's telling your own story that's not reliant on titles and companies, more around your experience and your skill set that you bring to the company. So that would be an important one. I also think it's important after a layoff, very early on, to take a hard look at your finances and find out how much runway do you have and what are your non-negotiables or negotiables in terms of going back to work. Understanding I have enough savings for about a 6-month runway, which means I need to get back to work in 6 months. That might then dictate how you approach this timeline, right? And then it might give you some peace of mind to say, okay, I have 6 months, right? That's a really important thing. I also think it's important to find some healthy coping skills. I talk a lot about the importance of physical movement, exercise, great way to combat some of the stages of grief, particularly like depression, where you'll see through exercise the release of dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, the body's natural way of giving you positive chemical release that will be a positive counterbalance to what you're feeling. Getting outside, getting some fresh air, taking your mind off of things for a minute. I think those three things in combination, there's probably a list of 20 things you could and should be doing,
Yeah.
but those are foundational. Then there's probably a lot more in the book too.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are three really good ones. I love them all. The coping mechanisms, I think, are ones we don't think about, but you have to be in a good mental state to present yourself to the next employer. The story is
Right.
really important, but I think you also have to be able to confidently tell that story. And I think also, as you were talking, I think we all know if 40% of the people are getting laid off, this is a very normal thing. So it's just important to internalize that this
Yeah.
is really normal. Over the age of 50, 50% of the people will get laid off. 50% of people will get a chance to actually retire. Most of us will be laid off. So I think it's
Right.
just really important to just know that and get
Right.
in a good mental space because it's not you.
Right.
It's really
Right.
not you.
Yeah. And as it becomes more and more ubiquitous, I
Mhm.
think companies can and are putting less weight on the fact that, okay, this person was laid off and reading something into it that they shouldn't. And the other thing too is understanding that number should
Mm.
help people feel more comfortable talking about it and being more open with it. One of the things that's important to think about is the hidden job market and how many jobs don't ever make it on a job board. The only way you
Mhm.
get access to those is through networking. The only
Mhm.
way of effective networking is to reach out to your network, tell them you've been laid off, tell them you're looking for a job if they know anybody or know anything, that you're looking for recommendations and information, and then the hidden job market opens up. But if you're afraid to talk about it with anybody or you're embarrassed to post about it, you're shooting yourself in the foot twice.
Yeah, I have seen this trend, you probably have too, where people after working for a long time at a company will say, I have been let go.
Right.
After years, I find myself on the job market. I love that. And then everybody gets it and they're
Yeah.
on your side and they're going to look for opportunities for you. I think it's really brave, but it's got to be really helpful all the way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. And it puts you in good graces with the company that you just left. Yeah.
Yeah, and you hope you get to the point that you feel that way soon after it happens, that you can say, "Oh, I'm so grateful for all the things that they gave me." But if you feel that's going to be helpful to your next job, is to kind of
Mhm.
take that. At least you can fake it till you make it. And doing
Yeah.
it in a LinkedIn post is not a bad way to go. So I love seeing that when I see it. I think it's
Yeah.
a really great way to go.
One of the things I write about is some type of a gratitude practice.
Yeah.
And as you think about what you're grateful for in this experience, I know it's hard to think about. You've had so much loss and so much has been taken away. But if you start to retrain your brain to think about, okay, what do I still have that I can be grateful for? You
Mhm.
start to see the glass being half full rather than half empty, and finding things that you can be grateful for with that last company, even though the separation experience probably hurt a lot. More than likely, it probably could have been done or handled better. Still finding some positivity there is a good way to get your brain thinking in a positive mindset.
Yeah, and in the situations that I've been in with loss, most of the time, what happened was to my favor. I don't see it in that moment. But in many ways, it was much better for me afterwards. It's helpful also to note that happens, that it can
Mhm.
be a better situation for you in the long run.
Yeah. Oftentimes, layoffs can be a get out of jail free card. So if you were unhappy at your job, maybe you were looking for a career pivot, a new career path. Sometimes layoffs can be that nudge to help get you going in a different or in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. Not always, but it can be true. So you went from a high profile advertising job to starting over emotionally. What part of your identity was the hardest to let go of?
Probably that business card
Yeah.
of okay, I was a whatever vice president of marketing at such and such company on such and such account. Early in my career, I derived a lot of my identity from that. When we meet people, we introduce ourselves, and
Mhm.
then as a result, people draw conclusions and inferences behind what you do and your job title and things. And that was easy for me to hide behind, and I hadn't created a strong personal identity outside of work. So when the
Mhm.
job was taken away, I was left with kind of a little bit of an empty shell, and I had to develop and build a personal life and interests and things outside of work so that then when it was taken away, I was still a whole person, right? And I wasn't just the person on the business card. In my book, I talk about my very first layoff very early in my career and my last layoff, which was not too long ago, but they span about 25 years. And there's a very big difference in how I handled and how I coped with them. And that was the lesson or the lessons that I try and describe through the book. But that was a big one of them is not having my identity so wrapped up in what I did or where I did it or who I did it for.
Yeah. And so it changes how you look at work too, I would think, because you do have this other part of your life that is valuable to you and you're grateful for.
Yeah, yeah. Good way to create some boundaries too, because you want to be protective of this other life and this person that you are and that kind of life that you built.
No, that's really helpful. So,
Mm.
what did I miss? What should I have asked? What would you want to share before we go?
I have a question for you. You mentioned that you're a Buddhist. I'm really interested in that. And I have some Buddhist allegories or
Hmm.
metaphors in the
You do?
book. I'm interested to hear what you think of those, what you thought of those, how or if they resonated with you in any way.
They definitely did. I think that's why I really was drawn to it. There's a lot in the job process where you're going to have a lot of interviews that don't go anywhere, a lot of resumes that get out that you never hear about. So not being attached to the process or to the outcome is going to be really helpful. The acceptance is really big, recognizing that these things happen. You captured a lot of these elements, and I think that's really helpful. And it's not just Buddhist, there's a lot of different wisdom traditions that hit some of these ideas, but I think that Buddhists get lost really well. I think that the whole idea that it's just a normal part of life and that it's going to come around, and we better get good at practicing
Yeah,
it.
that makes sense. Yeah. I would just add, if anybody likes what we've talked about, if anybody is going through a layoff and is looking for some support to manage the stages of grief, I'd invite you to check out the book. You can buy it anywhere books are sold, and you can connect with me. My contact information will be included in the show notes. I'm more than happy to connect with anybody. I would welcome the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Highly recommend the book. Thank you so much for being on the show and for talking with me and being here for listeners.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
That's all for today. If you want to learn more about Steve's book or get his contact information, those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, please subscribe, drop a review, or share it with your friends and family. That's the best way to get it in the hands of those who may benefit. If my daughters Sienna and Sylvie are listening, I just want you to know how proud I am of you. And I love you so much. Bye now.